So I've been working on a lot of server setups for both personal and client endeavors, and what I found is that the first 5 to 7 minutes of setup is pretty much the same every time. So what I want to share with you today is my process of securing and configuring a basic Ubuntu server. So first things first, let's get the system up to date and remove any unused dependencies that might be left from the upgrade. So this may take some time depending upon how out of date the installation media is, and it may ask about restarting services during the installation, so best watch for that before we make a cup of tea. Now that we're up to date, we can install some basic packages that will be very vital in keeping the system running. So things like vim, curl, git, fail2ban and UFW. These are just some basic packages for securing the system and some tools for maintenance. So configuring the system, we can set the hostname for the server. You can use a name that you want, but usually you'd go for something like a domain name. So if you had example.com, you'd put that here. For me, I'm going to be using this as a subdomain on my shop website. So this is going to be hub.toro.tech. We can see it's been set by logging into a new terminal within our connection using su and dash. And we can see that the hostname is in the prompt and updated to hub. So groups are useful if you have multiple people accessing the system using SSH, and I find that adding the wheel group back for sanity on Ubuntu just makes things a lot easier. And I also add a developer group, so if I have multiple devs working on the system, I can just create a group for every single one of them and then set the permissions accordingly. So since we created that wheel group, we're going to need to add it to the sudoers file so that it has sudo access. And just under the admin section, we can add back that new wheel group we've created. We'll also be adding the line defaults rootpw, so that requires the root password to run any sudo command regardless of the user, even if they have the group access. So now with the group set up, we can create a login for our new user. So I'll be creating a new account for myself with -m to make the home directory, -G for setting extra groups for the new user, -S for setting up the shell to be bash, and finally the username Jazza. So with the new user set up, I need to set a password for it. Now we can use su again with the new username, and we can see that the account is created. And we can also cd to home/Jazza and double check that's the home directory. Now with security in mind, I want to set the firewall to block any unwanted traffic to the network. We can see that it's currently set to inactive, so let's add port 22 and enable it. We'll get a warning that we could lose connection. We can just hit yes on that since we've already added port 22. Now you can also add other ports, so port 80 or 443 for HTTPS and HTTP access. And you can even use the name HTTP if really required. Usually I just add the numbers. Now we want to keep the system up to date to prevent any vulnerabilities crippling the system. So we can update the 50 unattended upgrades file and see that we can configure the server to restart on any updates that come through. And usually it's recommended if you enable this that you disable anything other than the security updates, otherwise the system's going to be restarting constantly. And we can see it's set to 2 AM. Now there's another file that determines the period of which everything is run, which is in the same folder, but named 10periodic. So the numbers in here represent the number of days between how often they're run. Now I'm going to be adding another line at the bottom for unattended upgrades, and I'm going to set that to 1. So upgrading the package list, downloading upgradable packages, and unattended upgrades are going to all be set to run every day, with auto clean interval set to every week. So these won't run until we enable the auto restart, so this file's just set up ready for if we uncomment those sections. So now we've got a user account created with root access, we can remove SSH access from root. So the line that's set for permit root login, we can change from yes to no. Okay, so before we reboot or restart any services, let's make sure we can connect into our new account and run sudo commands. That looks good, so we should be safe to restart the system, and this should configure all the services on startup. And it says here that we're going to need to anyway. Now once the server comes back up, we can look to adding our SSH key from our client system onto the server, and this will remove the requirement to type in the password every time we log in. So we can run SSH copy ID, and then the details we put in to connect into the server. And if we type the password in one last time to send that key over, we should now be able to connect in with just SSH and the details, and it should, there we go, connect in. Now I have a configuration file set for SSH which allows me to just specify a name, and it also sets, as you can see here, the host address and the username that we use to connect in. So this combined with the SSH key we've copied over, we should be able to just SSH hub, and that will allow us to connect directly in. So if I have much more to do with Ubuntu server setups, I could create a small shell script that I could easily download to each server that I run, and just automate everything requiring only username, hostname, but that's for another day. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my first 7 minutes on an Ubuntu server. Hopefully you learnt something, and if you have any questions, pop them in the comments down below.